So in this video, we're going to talk about something we can call growth policy. So remember we talked about, well, ultimately consumption depends on production. So we can just directly look at production. And our production depends on several things. So we have, remember we had our tech, right? That was A, that's our tech. And then we also have all these inputs. So we have inputs of capital, labor, human capital, and natural resources. And so in this first video, we're just going to be talking about capital. So our idea is going to be, we're going to talk about capital. So we're going to talk about ways to increase capital per worker. This is sometimes called capital deepening. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this, and then we're going to look at some problems with this later on. Okay, so the first thing we could do to increase capital per worker is going to be policy directing at encouraging savings and investment. Okay, so encouraging savings and investment. So just to give you a basic idea, so investment here we're talking, we can call investment I, capital I, and we call savings S for the rest of the notes. So investment basically is the same thing we talk about in GDP. We're talking about firms purchasing new physical capital, new structures, new equipment, new tools, new machines, new vehicles. Okay, and so this new capital is going to make those firms be more productive. And if on average we get more new capital per worker than we had before, we would expect our workers to be more productive. Now, where does the money come from that is used to do this investment? Well, it comes from savings. So there's sort of three ways that a firm can get money to do investment in new physical capital. One of them is they could save it themselves. So they could just not pay out all of their earnings, and they could retain earnings and keep it to then expand their firm, right? And lots of small businesses do this. Big firms do this as well, okay? The second two ways they can do it is to go into the financial system. So in the first way, they're doing the savings and the investment in-house. They're doing both sides of the equation. And then the second two ways that they could do it is they could go to borrow from the financial system. So in that case, other parties, usually households, are saving money into either directly or indirectly into the financial system. And then the firms can go into the financial system and borrow this money to do investment. Again, this is physical capital investment. And sort of the third way is, well, savers put their money into the financial system, but instead of putting in things like banks, they're putting them into stock market, for example. So in this case, the firms can go into the equity markets and also raise money for doing investment. So either way, it's the savings translates, more savings translates to more investment. Okay, so they take on some policy. The policy tries to increase savings, which then is going to increase investment, which then hopefully will increase the capital per worker, which should increase then the output per worker. Okay, this is the idea. So this last one, sorry, that should be an up arrow, is output per worker, Okay, so the last one is output per worker. So this is a basic idea. Now, how do they actually do this? Well, there's in the real world, there's lots of instances of governments doing this. Let's look first at centrally planned economies. So centrally planned economies like the Soviet Union, like China before around 1980. Okay, what can these economies do? Well, one of the typical things they do is to take more out of the rural sector than they put in and use this to subsidize urban industry. Okay, so what that would mean is farmers grow a certain amount of food, they produce a certain amount. Well, you take stuff out, and what you give back to the farmers in terms of government services, as well as goods produced in the manufactured goods from the urban areas, is much less and worth much less than what you take out, right? So and so it's sort of forced savings. You're creating a national savings from the rural areas that is then used to subsidize the urban sector, and you can then grow the capital stock in the urban sector. So you take out of the rural areas to subsidize the urban sector. Okay, so the rural areas don't get, they don't consume their full production. They consume something less than their full production. You can only really do this if you're a centrally planned economy. because you have to be able to get the things below their worth, right? You have to should be a central economy that can do this by directive. This can lead to huge disaster if not calculated correctly, because if they take too much out of the rural areas, they can create not just people living in poverty, but it can go beyond poverty to famine and starvation. In fact, this did happen in several instances in both the USSR and in China. If you're a market economy, and so this would be more like what we're seeing countries do today. If you're a market economy, well, how do you get more savings to get more capital? Well, you have to do it with policies. You have to do it with sort of encouraging people, because you can't make them do things. So generally, this is tax policy to encourage savings and investment. So this could be things like investment tax credit. So a firm, when they do some major investment, then they get a reduction in their taxes for a period of time afterwards. This could be things like 401ks, IRAs, and other savings policies, right? So you give people some tax benefits and you let them keep more of their money if they save their money for the long run. And then this puts more money into the savings system than would have otherwise been there, which then can lead to more investment. So these are two ideas that we have. Now,